He thought it was just another morning, a new school, a new start. But before the day was over, a single act of hate would turn the cafeteria into a battlefield and expose the quiet power that comes from control, not chaos. When a bully decided to make a show out of the new black student, no one expected what would follow. No shouting, no revenge, just a silence so sharp it made the whole room freeze. And when that silence finally broke, everything changed. But what no one knew yet was that Jacob Daniels wasn't just another transfer student. He was something Martin Pike would never see coming. Jacob Daniels didn't stand out when he first walked to the gates of Oakridge High. 17, quiet, composed. The kind of student teachers barely noticed and bullies mistook for an easy target. He'd just moved from Atlanta with his mother, hoping for a clean slate after years of bouncing between schools. His morning started the same way. Earbuds and hoodie up, a calm rhythm to his steps that made him seem untouchable. But beneath that calm was discipline carved from years of training, a lifetime spent learning control through Taekwondo, where every movement was a lesson in restraint. To most students, Jacob was invisible. To one, he was a challenge waiting to be conquered. Martin Pike, the self-appointed king of Oakridge, had built his reputation on fear. No one questioned him, no one fought back, and certainly no one ignored him. So when the new kid walked by without a flinch, it wasn't curiosity Martin felt. It was insult. Jacob found small moments of peace in his new routine, sitting at the edge of the cafeteria, notebook open, watching the world around him unfold in predictable patterns. But every calm morning has its breaking point, and his was coming faster than anyone expected. If he had known what waited for him in that cafeteria, he might have taken one last deep breath before stepping inside. But some lessons, especially about hate, can't be avoided. They have to be faced. By the end of Jacob's first week at Oakridge High, the atmosphere around him had shifted from curiosity to hostility. It started small, a shove in the hallway, a whispered slur barely masked as a joke, a locker door that suddenly wouldn't open because someone had jammed it shut. Each act chipped away at the illusion of normalcy he had hoped to find. Martin Pike and his crew lingered near his classes, watching, waiting for a reaction. When it didn't come, they pushed harder. During lunch, Martin accidentally bumped Jacob's tray, sending food across the table. The laughter that followed was loud, too loud, like the sound of approval from an audience desperate to stay on the right side of power. Jacob stayed calm, eyes steady, movements deliberate. He cleaned up the mess, sat back down, and continued eating. That silence, the way he refused to play his part, was what unnerved him most. The next day, someone scrawled the word outsider in black marker across his locker. He didn't even pause to read it. He just opened the door, collected his books, and walked to class. But every step through those crowded halls felt heavier, every whisper cutting a little deeper. The injustice wasn't just in the actions. It was in the laughter that followed, in the teachers who looked away, in the students who filmed instead of helping. Rowan, the quiet boy who had seen it all before, watched in silence. He had been Martin's target once too, but something about Jacob's restraint made him believe things could be different this time. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon when Martin, desperate to reclaim his dominance, spotted Jacob sitting alone at lunch again. A smirk formed as he grabbed his half-empty cup of iced coffee and made his way across the cafeteria. Conversations dimmed, as if the room itself knew what was coming. Without a word, Martin tilted the cup, sending the cold liquid cascading down Jacob's head and shoulders. The room erupted, some laughing, others gasping, everyone watching. Cameras came up, ready to record humiliation. But Jacob didn't flinch. He didn't shout, didn't stand, didn't even look angry. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie, rose slowly, and locked eyes with Martin. The noise around them seemed to die. That single, steady stare spoke louder than any retaliation ever could. It stripped Martin's confidence bare, left him exposed in front of everyone. Jacob's calm wasn't weakness. It was warning. The crowd didn't understand it yet, but Rowan did. He saw the quiet fury behind those calm eyes and knew that something inside Jacob had shifted. Martin laughed it off, forcing bravado he no longer felt, but as he turned back to his crew, their smirks faltered. The silence following that moment spread faster than any rumor. Over the weekend, The video hit social media. Thousands of views. Comments split between admiration and mockery. But the truth was clear. Jacob hadn't been broken. Martin's power had. By Monday, the school buzzed with tension. Martin's laughter was too loud again, his movements too forced, like a man pretending not to feel the world closing in. The more he tried to reassert control, the more it slipped through his fingers. Jacob stayed composed, unbothered, the living proof that restraint could be more powerful than rage. Yet beneath that control, something simmered, a quiet storm waiting for the right moment to break. And when Martin decided that humiliation wasn't enough anymore, when he pushed for a confrontation no one could walk away from, Oakridge High would witness what happens when hate meets discipline and cruelty meets consequence. He thought the worst was over, but the real test of strength was only just beginning. The confrontation came faster than anyone expected. By midweek, the tension inside Oakridge High had reached its breaking point. Every hallway felt electric, charged with whispers and half-buried fear. Martin Pike couldn't stand anymore. The way people looked at him, the way they whispered Jacob's name like he was some kind of legend. The cafeteria video had shattered his control, and every day since, he had been unraveling. That afternoon, during gym, his anger finally boiled over. The sound of basketballs bouncing echoed through the gymnasium, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, laughter bouncing off the walls. Jacob stood near the edge of the court, tying his shoelace, when Martin's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The words were sharp, heavy with venom, the kind that left the room silent. He called Jacob a name, one soaked in hate and history, a word that carried centuries of pain. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The laughter, the movement, even the air seemed to freeze. Jacob stood still, his chest rising slowly, the muscles in his jaw tightening beneath the calm mask he had worn all week. Rowan felt his stomach drop. He had heard that word before, but never in a moment so public, so cruel. The teacher had stepped out for a moment. No authority left in the room, only eyes, watching, waiting. Martin took a step forward, pushing Jacob's shoulder, daring him to react. The shove wasn't hard enough to hurt, but the intention behind it was. Phones came out again. The crowd wanted another show. For a moment, it seemed Jacob would walk away, just like before. But this time was different. This time, the line had been crossed too many times to ignore. When Martin shoved again, harder, Jacob's hand shot up with the precision of years of training. In one swift movement, he redirected Martin's arm, twisted it, and dropped him to the floor in a single, controlled motion. The gym erupted, gasps, shouts, disbelief. Martin scrambled to stand, furious, swinging wildly, but Jacob sidestepped with ease. A second later, Martin lunged again, and Jacob caught his wrist, twisted sharply, and the sound that followed silenced the room, a crack that echoed like thunder. Martin fell, clutching his hand, his face twisted in shock and pain. No one laughed this time. The power had shifted completely, and everyone felt it. Jacob stood over him, breathing steady, his eyes steady but filled with something deeper than anger. It wasn't victory. It was the weight of every moment he had chosen peace when others chose cruelty. He looked around at the circle of faces staring back, some in awe, others ashamed. This isn't strength, his eyes seemed to say without words. This is survival. Teachers burst through the doors moments later, shouting, pulling students apart, demanding answers. But the truth was already clear. The bully who ruled through fear had been broken. Not by violence, but by the quiet strength of the boy he tried to humiliate. As Martin was helped up, his face pale and shaken, Jacob simply turned, picked up his bag, and walked away. No celebration, no gloating, just silence, the kind that leaves a mark. But what came after that silence would test them all, because the world outside those gym doors wasn't ready to see what true justice looked like. The gym emptied slowly that afternoon, but the echo stayed long after the doors closed. Jacob sat on the bleachers, the world around him a blur of whispers and flashing phone screens. He could still hear the faint crack of bone, the shocked gasps, the sudden silence that followed. It wasn't pride that filled him. It was exhaustion. He hadn't wanted to fight, hadn't wanted to prove anything. But sometimes silence stops being strength and starts becoming survival. Mr. Harrison, the principal, called him into the office not long after. Martin sat across from him, hand wrapped in a brace, eyes downcast but still burning with resentment. The principal spoke about school rules, zero tolerance for violence, consequences. A week's suspension. That was the price for defending himself in a world that never seemed to care who threw the first punch. Only who hit back. Jacob didn't argue. He nodded, calm as ever, and stood to leave. But before he walked out, he turned just slightly toward Martin. No words, just a look, a quiet truth that said, "You'll never owe me again." Outside the office, Rowan waited, eyes wide with something like awe. For the first time in years, the fear in his shoulders had loosened. "You changed everything," he whispered as Jacob passed. And maybe he had, because by Monday morning, the story had spread beyond Oakridge High. The video, edited, captioned, dissected, was everywhere. Some called Jacob a hero. Others said he went too far. But beneath the noise, there was something undeniable. People were finally talking, not just about a fight, but about what led to it. The quiet cruelties, the words no one stopped, the way a boy could be pushed until his dignity became a weapon. Teachers began paying closer attention. Students who once laughed at Martin's jokes now avoided him. Rowan, once invisible, began to walk taller. Even Martin's crew started showing up to class quieter, their bravado replaced by uneasy reflection. Change didn't come overnight, but for the first time, it had a place to start. Jacob's suspension passed quickly. When he returned, the halls were quieter. He felt the stares, the unspoken questions, the unease that comes when community is forced to see itself honestly. He didn't respond to the attention, good or bad. He just moved forward, the same way he always had, steady, grounded, unbothered. Rowan often walked beside him now, not as a shadow, but as a friend. Together, they represented something the school had never seen before, resistance without rage, strength without spectacle. But beneath the surface, Jacob still carried the weight of it all, the knowledge that what happened to him wasn't unique. For every moment caught on camera, there were hundreds that weren't. For every bully who got caught, there were others protected by silence. He knew that the world outside Oakridge's walls would still see him the same way Martin had, through the narrow lens of bias and assumption. Weeks later, during an assembly on school unity, the principal used the incident as a turning point. He spoke carefully, avoiding blame, but his words hung heavy in the air. Respect begins when silence ends. Students clapped, but Jacob didn't. He wasn't interested in applause or speeches. Change didn't come from words. It came from courage, from those moments when someone chose to stand up instead of look away. After the assembly, Rowan found him sitting under the oak tree behind the gym, the same spot where he had spent his first lunch alone. "You know," Rowan said quietly, "they're saying you inspired half the school." Jacob smiled faintly. Then maybe they're finally seeing. That day, as the final bell rang and the crowd spilled into the parking lot, Jacob paused by the entrance and looked back at the building. The same walls that once held laughter at his expense now echoed something different, awareness. The same eyes that once looked through him now carried hesitation, even guilt. But he didn't need their apology. He had already taken back what mattered most, his peace, his control, his dignity. Stories like Jacob's don't end when the video stops. They ripple outward through classrooms, neighborhoods, entire generations. They remind us that racism isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it hides behind laughter, silence, or the comfort of pretending not to see. But every act of courage, no matter how small, chips away at that comfort. Every moment of calm defiance forces the world to look closer at what it tries to ignore. Jacob Daniels didn't set out to be a symbol. He just wanted to start over. But by standing his ground, he exposed something bigger than a bully. He revealed a truth about strength that can't be measured in fists or followers. Strength is choosing dignity when the world tries to strip it away. It's staying calm when others want you broken. It's knowing who you are, even when they call you something else. So the question isn't just what happened to Jacob. It's what we do after hearing his story. Do we stay silent? Or do we finally stand with those who have been forced to fight for their right to simply exist in peace? Because until we answer that, the story doesn't end. It only starts again with someone else.